Excuse me, Mr. DJ.
Hey, check this out. We got a great show coming your way.
From the ECSI Sports Studios, it's the Midday Market Report with Jeff Dawson.
Good afternoon, sports fans from all around the globe. I am the host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and this is our weekly, I wanted to say, closing bell of football with a special guest, Mr. Ron from Ron A Sports, talking NCAA and NFL. As you see, I got my hat and sunglasses on. It's personal today, I think. And we're going to take this to another level as Dion has already taken it as Colorado State heads into town. And you know, I've been talking to a lot of colleagues and friends and mixed reviews. I love Dion. I love Dion when he played baseball, when he played in the NFL. I love Dion when he came onto the scene at Jackson State. I love the idea of him coming to Colorado. And what he has done in the first 2 weeks, and you know, and to have this happen so close to kickoff, which was going to be an interstate rivalry, which most would say, you know, when you have these interstate rivalries, it's the winning team gets the, you know, wins the recruiting battle. But we know there's really no one right now on the planet that is going to get more recruits than Mr. Deion Sanders in prime time. So as I told Ron backstage, I didn't want to scare him with this little giddy up here and tell him that it was personal this week. But let's bring him on, the one and only Mr. Ron from Ron A Sports.
Yeah, you scared me. I thought I was on a different show. I thought we were going to do some music or some disco or something. I don't know. That was cute.
Well, I hope you didn't take it personal. So, you know, before great, as we talked backstage, 3-0 last week on your NCAA picks, as you stated to me backstage. Unfortunately, the games that you had highlighted this week in the NCAA, the numbers have already left the building, so we won't even divulge into there. But can't start a show, Ron, without talking about primetime in Colorado. 2-0. I don't want to say a sluggish start against Nebraska. We know Nebraska can play defense. We knew Matt Rule would have them ready, and he did. But in the second half, the cream rose to the top, and Colorado took care of business. Quick thoughts, where they started against TCU, where they are today after beating Nebraska, and Colorado State rolling into town tomorrow.
Mildly surprised at how well their defense performed. I know Nebraska is no great shakes, but you know, I just thought that this would be a tremendous learning curve for Colorado in terms of number of available bodies defensively and whether or not they could put it all together so fast. Again, not surprised offensively. They brought in the former Kent State coach, Sean Lewis, I think his name is, and he's done a wonderful job with all the newcomers there. So offensively, fine. Defensively, better than what I expected. Wasn't going to be easy against Nebraska. Coming off that first win and all the hype and playing that first game, there had to be a little bit of a letdown early. It's a loaded Pac-12 this year, so I don't know exactly where they fit in, but obviously they're not going to be a pushover like the last couple of seasons.
And you know, you talk about the opening game at TCU, 21-point underdogs winning outright against the number 2 team in the country last year, TCU. Home opener against Nebraska. That used to be the day after Thanksgiving game, must-watch TV, Colorado and Nebraska. And you talk about look-aheads. This is the biggest look-ahead ever after those 2 wins. In comes Colorado State, with Colorado having to travel to Oregon next week. And then the coach pulls that stunt, and now it's personal again.
Yep. No look ahead anymore. Now he wants to win the Battle of Colorado. And they're not going to let up on the gas at all. I mean, they're going to run their offense. Their offense tends to be more of a pass first right now because the team is putting their wide receivers in situations where they're going to win. Curious to see if the defense could keep it up against a less than spectacular Colorado State offense. So we're probably looking at a pretty big mismatch. They're going to be focused on the game because Deion will use any sort of motivational tactic he could to keep them focused, and he got a lot of help this week.
We'll follow up on the look ahead. As I've said all week, and we talked about it a few seconds ago, it's football, it's college football, but it is not a great slate. The headliner in my eyes is Tennessee at Florida, but let's stick with the look aheads. You said there's 2 or 3 teams that could get caught looking ahead because next week's slate is going to be a must-watch TV. There's 3, 4, 5 games that are going to stop time, and you're going to be sitting there and watching.
Yeah, I will. That's for sure. There could be as many as 6 matchups between top 25 teams. So 12 of the 25 might be playing each other. Hopefully we won't have any stumbles from that. So it's going to be incredible. So it's always interesting how 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-olds deal with it and how even young coaching staffs deal with how much do you play the guys this week? How much do you look ahead the next week? How much do reporters are going to be in their faces? You face, Michigan next, you face Alabama next, whatever the case may be. So 3 games interest me in this regard. One of them, Notre Dame. Notre Dame's done nothing wrong defensively. They've been incredible. They have a running attack that just wears you down. They play a pretty poor defensive team in Central Michigan. I think Central Michigan has the ability to put some points on this game. The line's roughly 34 you have to lay. Notre Dame's next game is against Ohio State. There's got to be a little bit of a look ahead there. Now, what it is it's not a conference game. The other 2 I'm going to mention are conference games. So Notre Dame may not have that same look ahead magic, but this is a marquee game. If Notre Dame wants to be in the Final Four playoff discussion this year, it probably has to win or have a great effort against Ohio State. Maybe next year when there's a 12-team playoff, that's different. But this year, there's got to be a little bit of a look ahead. 2 others, Mississippi and Georgia Tech. Mississippi plays this game. They got a break last week. They played a Tulane team without their starting quarterback. It's not a complete team for Mississippi. Their quarterback, Jackson Dart, not always the most careful quarterback, but he can make some big plays, and he does it with his arm as well as his legs. They play at Georgia Tech this week. Georgia Tech's a tricky team. They hung close week 1. Appreciated that. I think Georgia Tech's the kind of team that's going to find a way to lose. But in this game, which opened roughly 20.5, went to 21, and now we're sitting around 18.5, 19, you got Mississippi playing Alabama next. And Lane Kiffin, Nick Saban, there's going to be some look ahead. They almost had probably outplayed Alabama last year. Let me say they were up double digits even in the first half. Then they got behind, but they still had a chance to win at the end of the game, didn't get it done. That game's on their calendar. There's absolutely no question about it. Curious about this one. One more from your neck of the woods, Florida State, Boston College. Boston College isn't that great a team, and Florida State is proving that with 200 plus offensive line starts returning. I mean, they may have the most experienced offensive line returning that I've ever seen, and that really does account for something. They could really steamroll this Boston College team. They've also been favored by as much as 28. Today it took a dive. It went down to 25 in some circles, 25.5. But Florida State plays at Clemson next week. So we've got back-to-back road games for them. These teams are all superior to the teams they're playing this week, but I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of them are really close.
Shout out to Mr. Russell Saylor. Thank you so much for joining and welcoming this afternoon with Ron. Ron, let's stay with Alabama for a second. Nick saw enough. Texas came into town and took care of business the year before. They should have won the game at home. They traveled to Tuscaloosa. What really shocked me, it's been a long time since I've seen this, is strong second half by Texas. Did get some good back and forth in the third quarter. Alabama punts in the fourth quarter with 7 minutes and 19 seconds left and never saw the ball again. Texas was able to run the clock out. They've gone to a quarterback change. Too early? Is Nick panicking? Or with who they're playing this week, he's giving them a week to get settled for Ole Miss next week?
It's interesting. We had quarterbacks drafted 1-2 with Alabama and Ohio State last year. And sometimes the replacements, it's just next man up because it's Alabama, it's Ohio State. Of course, they're going to be good. But we see a drop this year. And I understand what Nick Saban is doing. And this is kind of a pushover situation. They're going to be playing at USF. Interestingly enough, Nick Saban teams are 5-11 against the spread after a straight up loss in their last 16. So Nick kind of takes the losses personally and maybe doesn't. I'm trying to get in his head. I don't know if that's true or not, but they don't bounce back as well as some other teams. Some teams have great bounce back strategies. So why not inject some life into the team? Get a quarterback. They may go back to the former guy. For example, let's say he only puts up 20 points against USF and they're favored by 30 or 34 or whatever it is. He's going to get a good read on whether or not they could plow through this particular team. I think it's a good time to have the change.
The marquee game before we head over to the NFL, Tennessee travels to Florida. In my mind, I had that ugly performance that I saw Florida put up against Utah. In comes Joe Milton in Tennessee, kind of playing a little grab butt last week. Which team's going to show up? In the high explosive Vols of last year that put up 40 and 50 with a blink of an eye? Or is there a reason? I'm seeing money coming in on Florida. Is that seem like the right side?
Yeah, the line, I think, opens 7, and there has been money coming in where we're seeing like something like 5.5. My particular number is 6. But Florida has a pretty good history in this series. If Florida is going to win, they have to do what I thought they'd be able to do in all games this year, and that's run the ball. They have 2 running backs who had very good seasons in their initial year last year. Tennessee is not the most complete defensive team. They're getting a little bit better, but you'd obviously argue that offense is the name of the game, and they strike so quickly with their fast-paced offense. By rule, or because of that, Tennessee's defense is going to be on the field a little bit longer than most teams. They're going to lose the time of possession because they're going to score so quick. So because of that, Florida is going to have a chance perhaps to wear down Tennessee's defense. I'm not playing the game, but my lean would be Florida because I think they can do enough. They pointed for this game. This is an important game for their coach, for their team, and I think they have the style of play to put up points.
NFL, like to call this segment upgrades, downgrades, and panic or not panic. We have week 1 under the belt. Just replaying the tape, shocked at the Rams' performance in the second half, that is, at Seattle. Pittsburgh, who the whole world was on against San Fran, that game was over in the first 6 minutes. The Dallas defense, which we knew was good, but they manhandled Daniel Jones. That's just a few. Philadelphia, 16 points in the first 7 minutes. And then I thought the Patriots outplayed them for the next 3 quarters. Had an opportunity to win that game. But your assessments of week 1, Ron?
Yeah, so starting with the Patriot game, the unfortunate thing for New England is they had 2 offensive linemen declared out right before the game. And I think there were growing pains in terms of protection and everything else. And they got behind by their own undoing. And then once the game settled down, maybe even just like last night's game, Philadelphia was outplayed week 1 for 3 quarters plus, and Philadelphia was outplayed at least a little bit by Minnesota. -3 turnover ratio helped. Philadelphia could be sitting 0-2, but good teams and even great teams find a way to win. So they won, but they weren't the best team. Not panicking on either team, certainly haven't changed my opinion. I think Philadelphia could play better. I think New England, the margin for error with this New England team, because they have some flaws in terms of speed, in terms of wide receiver play, in terms of offensive line, margin for error for New England, so slim that they're going to have to win these close battles. They're going to have to catch that pass and not have 4th and inches become a turnover to the other team. It's really going to be about executing and doing the assignment sound kind of principles that Bill Belichick teaches. You mentioned San Francisco and the Rams. Those are 2 of the 4 teams that I think we talk about, you and I, everybody would talk about, don't overreact to week 1. Please don't overreact. The 4 teams that I have said, yeah, they're better than I thought would be San Francisco, the Rams, Cleveland, who came out to play some really good defense, and maybe the Lions. I did not expect the Lions defense to come together as I expected. What I saw offensively, no problem, but the defense was a little bit better than I thought. Those 4. Downgrade would have to be Chicago. But I'm going to give you 6 teams not to panic yet. I know Vegas is 1-0, but they didn't look good, but I'm not panicking on them. Buffalo, obviously Josh Allen better play within the system a little bit. The strategy they used was horrible against the Jets. Not panicking yet. Kansas City, they have so many targets to throw to, but none of them know how to run routes yet. Not panicking yet. At sometime around week 7, 8, 9, Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes are going to figure out which wide receivers are going to make the best breaks and the best separation and give Mahomes the best chance to win. He's got a lot of people to choose from. 3 or 4 will step it up. Certainly not panicking about Cincinnati. Joe Burrow, we've been through this before. Injury in preseason, not ready at all. By time week 5 or 6, it's going to be fine. Not going to panic on the Jets. I know it's Zach Wilson, but he's had a chance to sit and learn, mature. He's going to make mistakes. He's not Aaron Rodgers. There's going to be more turnovers, but I don't think he's going to be that wild-eyed kid that says, hey, wait a second, the game's too large for me. That defense is too good. I'm not going to panic there. And 0-40, I'm not going to panic on the New York Giants yet either. We know Daniel Jones has trouble versus pressure. We know Dallas brings pressure, but there's going to be plenty of games that the New York Giants won't face the Dallas Cowboy front 4. So I think it's too early to panic on a lot of these teams.
I'm going to piggyback. You talked about Cleveland. Joe has not won in Cleveland yet in his career. It was an awful rain, wind. It was bad conditions. Anytime there was any pressure, both him and Watson throwing the ball into the dirt at feet receivers. T. Higgins shut out. Eye-opening. Now they come back home, and Cleveland. Let me start here. Pittsburgh 0-1. We know Tomlin's never had a losing season. A lot of high expectations for the emergence of Kenny Pickens, Deontay Johnson with a hamstring now. We like their defense. Vegas opened up the Browns 2-point favorites in Pittsburgh. Were you surprised with that opening number?
A little bit surprised. I opened it at Pick'em, so a little bit surprised at that particular number. I realize, and this is what happens, cluster injuries matter. And Pittsburgh has injuries, not just cluster, but numerous injuries, including their number 1 wide receiver. They don't have a lot of speed to make up for that. They don't have a lot of experience to make up for that. I think they lost a defensive lineman. I think they lost a couple on the offense. I think it's a reaction to the fact that Pittsburgh showed no signs, at least beforehand. That was one of the games that I certainly got wrong. Pittsburgh against San Francisco. No signs that they were going to be blown out week 1. And it's concerning. This game is important. There are a number of teams where week 2 is just going to be important. If Pittsburgh loses this game, realize that they're going to be 0-2, 2 home games, and a loss in the division at home. I hate to say it, but this is such an important game for them. There's a lot of technical factors in their favor. I just wish they were a little bit more healthy.
We talked about Cincinnati. We talked about Joe Burrow, 0-1 home opener, a divisional rival against Lamar Jackson. I think I've seen it all over Twitter when Lamar's getting 3.5 or more, 10-0-1 versus the number. You talked about a bounce back for Joe. I think they did start 0-2 last year as well. Thoughts on the Ravens kind of sleepwalking through the first half and then picked it up in the second half. Zay Flowers is the real deal. Mark Andrews is back at practice. Does Lamar and the Ravens pose not just a cover, but a potential upset alert in Cincinnati, do you think?
Sure, it's possible. I actually think both teams, whoever wins this, I think is going to win ugly. Because Baltimore, I don't know, we say this every year at this time. Maybe if we're on next year, we'll just record it again. Baltimore has a lot of injuries. Let's just say that for every September that we ever do this. It's just crazy what's going on in Baltimore. And a lot is going to depend on Lamar Jackson in the pass game. And he was a little bit uncomfortable in that new scheme week 1. And Cincinnati's not going to make him feel any more comfortable with their defense. And Cincinnati's certainly not ready either. It's just going to be an ugly game. When you lose Dobbins with his yards per carry, it's going to matter. And I like Gus Edwards, but he's more of a 10 to 12 carry back. He's not your 20 carry back. And anybody else they use, like Justice Hill, is a goal line back at this point in time, more than just I'm going to use them for a whole series and expect that we're going to move the chains for 5 minutes. I don't see that against Cincinnati, even though maybe the run defense a little bit weaker now. Kind of an ugly game. I think Cincinnati, I would lean to Cincinnati actually, unless Jackson turns on the switch, because Cincinnati's kind of had their way with Baltimore at home. I think they reset a little bit better. I think the defense frustrates Lamar Jackson without his running back. So I'd probably lean Cincy, but I expect an ugly game.
A bunch of Owen, obviously, there's 16 now. No, actually, There is one 0-2 team now, and that's the Minnesota Vikings. But in my head, I'm like, okay, there's 16 0-1 teams. Of those teams, you talked about a loss this week in 0-2, and the number, the odds of making the playoffs after starting 0-2 is almost slim to none. So give us your potential 0-2 danger teams.
Reading from my list, Pittsburgh 0-2 danger. There's no question about that, just as we mentioned. I think New York Giants would be damaged as a playoff team if they went 0-2. They've got Dallas and Philly are ahead of them, and they're not going anywhere. Those two teams are clearly better than the New York Giants. You can't lose a game at Arizona and be feeling good about yourself in terms of making the playoffs. If Denver lost their second straight home game to Washington, that would be a concern for me. 0-2, it's not, there are some flaws with Kansas City right now, and there's some flaws even with the Chargers. But Denver's hardly a complete team. They cannot afford to go 0-2 at home. And I think Kansas City, not necessarily that they won't win the division, but if they lost to Jacksonville revenge game, with Kelsey back and with their defensive linemen back and all signed, they'd be 0-2 and Jones. And it wouldn't be, I could still see them winning the division, but that number 1 seed starts to slip away a little bit. And that's a concern for a variety of reasons. So there are a number of teams that I don't think can rebound from 0-2. There's a couple of teams I think could, but these 4 in particular, I think it would be problematic.
talk some QB issues, running back issues. Obviously, the 4 plays in, Aaron Rodgers goes down. Hats off to the Jets. Just fighting through it. And I've talked to a lot of people this week, and I understand it's Zach Wilson, but you have to remember that their defense will travel. Their defense will keep them in games. And it's funny, they're catching 9.5 this week against a turnover-prone quarterback named Dak Prescott. I agree with you. I don't think even with the loss of Rodgers that they're doomed and gloomed. Not that it'll be easier, but Breece Hall looked phenomenal. They have a potential superstar in the making with Garrett Wilson. Their defense looked great. So that will be interesting. Some running backs that haven't practiced this week. Aaron Jones has not practiced this week. So give us your thoughts on the quarterback and running back issues.
Zach Wilson, we had a lively discussion. I put out a tweet, I think right in the middle of the game, in the Jet game. And it got 37,000 views or something like that about what's the difference in points between Zach Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. And the prevailing thought from a lot of experts, and they're right, they did the math and everything. I got a lot of highfalutin people responding, was that it was somewhere between, let's say 5.25, 5.75 point, right in there. Let's just use 5.5 points. And Vegas seems to be using 5.5 points with the 9.5 point spread. I'm going to argue that should be lower. I made my difference 3.5 points. And the reason being is because the Jets are going to simplify things the same way that New Orleans, when they lost Drew Brees, simplified it for Teddy Bridgewater. And that's just one example. There were other examples where if you have the defense, like the Jets certainly do, and the Saints did, that you could alter your offensive game plan, put Zach Wilson into less I have to win the game scenarios. Now, if the Dallas game gets out of hand, they may lose by 3 touchdowns. A loss is a loss, big deal. But I think over the course of the season, they'll put Zach Wilson into better situations because they know the defense will keep this team close. Teddy Bridgewater went 5-0 when he was assigned the starting quarterback position when Brees went down. Last year, Cooper Rush went 4-0 or 4-1 when Dak Prescott went down because they simplified the system. I think the same thing will happen with the Jets, and that's why I think the difference is 3.5 points. Talking about running backs, Aaron Jones would be a loss, but they have a complimentary running back, so I wouldn't be as worried about that. The loss at Baltimore's running back is Moore. I think there's another running back that was declared out this morning that is a big loss. I'm trying to think who that is. There is a running back though that was declared out. Can't think of it off the top of my head. If it comes to me.
Was it Mozart? He was questionable.
No, I wasn't. Not coming to me right now, but when there's a tandem, I don't worry as much. When there's one person and their yards per carry is pretty high, then it affects game planning issues. There's certain teams that are going to be forced to pass, and if you're one-dimensional passing the ball, it makes it easier for the defense.
We are going into this weekend. The Patriot game is the late game on Sunday night. The Storm will be gone. Should be fine. Tua to Tyreek Hill. The best game probably of the week. Back and forth at the Chargers. The Patriots again played 3 great quarters. They were a toe tap away probably from potentially tying, if not winning that game. In comes Miami, 2.5 point favorites. The NFL didn't do them any justice, by the way, starting them in LA, and then have to come up to New England for their second game. What is your thoughts, your breakdown of Miami and New England on Sunday night?
Okay. I'm going to get to that. I did think of the running back, though, thanks to one of the chat things. I realized what was going on. Austin Eckler of the Chargers may be missing. He's listed as doubtful.
Okay.
So if Austin Eckler doesn't go, that is a downgrade. Even though Kelly has looked really good for the first time in preseason and in game one, he looked really good. You're missing the dual threat of Austin Eckler, and that would be an issue. Miami, New England, it's a curious matchup because you have the speed of Miami. We touched upon this last week, and I know I did on a couple of shows. The Chargers don't draft for speed, and it showed against Tyreek Hill. New England tends not to draft for speed. They draft for fundamentally sound players, and I wonder if that's going to show up against Tyreek Hill, or is Bill going to mortgage everything and say, Miami, you can have the run. And I have a feeling he's going to do that. Miami, you can run all you want, but we're going to double all your key wide receivers and see what happens and not let Tyreek go, because there's a speed difference between Miami and New England. Technical factors favor New England. The line at +3 is higher than my power rating support. So New England needs to get a long look as far as this game at +3 or higher. The question is, will they play fundamentally sound like they usually do? Will their offensive line won't come back to bite them this week because Miami's not a great pass rushing team. I know they sacked Justin Herbert twice in the last drive, but until that, they had one sack the whole game. So I think New England, this is an important game for New England, and I think it's the kind of game that they should win. I would give them, if I had to put it in probabilities, 55% win shot.
Going back to Austin Eckler, he was kind of hinting, he's a great guy. He believes in the fantasy football game. He was hinting all week that he wasn't going to play. I've actually taken it a step further. Maybe you heard, maybe you can help me. I don't think it's just an ankle sprain. I'm leaning more towards the high ankle sprain. And in fantasy football, the two words that you don't want to hear is high ankle sprain and turf toe. And again, I don't know Eckler's, pain thresh or whatever. Maybe it is just an ankle sprain. But I ran to the windows. No one else challenged me either, picking up Isaiah Spiller everywhere just because to add depth. And I liked what I saw with the two-headed monster with Eckler and Joshua Kelly. I know Joshua Kelly will be the workhorse there, but they do also have a rookie by the name of Elijah Dotson who had a great preseason. Do you have a crystal ball there? Will they go more towards a Spiller, or do you think it's just a hot hand, or do they really like the rookie with Dotson?
Looking for my crystal ball. I misplaced it. I'm sorry. I wish I had that crystal ball. Let's see. So this week, the Chargers are at Tennessee, and it's incredibly difficult to run it on Tennessee. So what I think is that if Joshua Kelly has taken the next step in his development, he's going to get probably 2/3 of the carries or more. Isaiah Spiller had a wonderful career at Texas A&M. His combine killed him. He has an incredible, he has a lack of speed. Let me put it that way. We're talking 4.63, 4.65, maybe even a little higher. Threshold for running backs in the combine, like it or not, that 40-yard dash is 4.5. If you're over 4.5, you better be something really special to make it in the NFL. And some do, because if you're off 4.52, 4.53, Spiller's off too much for my liking, especially against Tennessee. So I think this is a Justin Herbert, I'm going to be throwing 40 times type game. And unless Kelly's taken the next step, and I give Kelly a lot of credit for what he did last week and what he did in preseason.
Before we flip it to you for the closing remarks, as we always do, is there any games or spreads that you can give to our listeners that you think just a tad off, or that you might already have in pocket?
The lines that are off for me, I was surprised the Ram line crossed 7. I think San Francisco right now is the best team in football, but I still was surprised the line crossed 7. It's come back now, but that surprised me. Another line that, well, it's funny because I was surprised Green Bay became the favorite at Atlanta, and then Atlanta immediately flipped back. So, and same thing with Indianapolis, Houston. I was surprised Indy became the favorite, and then Houston flipped back. So I guess overall, not terribly surprised at the line. I think I'll make a general statement because I don't have a standout game necessarily. My general statement would be, don't be surprised if you see a lot of dogs win again this week. I think we're still feeling things out. I think quarterbacks are still rusty. We had some winning quarterbacks throw for barely over 100 yards. I do expect some mild upsets across the board. I don't know if it'll be Jacksonville, double revenge at home against Kansas City. I don't know if it's going to be New England with technical factors in their favor, or Pittsburgh with technical factors in their favor. But general word of the wise, especially if you like teasing games and stuff like that, I don't have a lot of trust in favorites yet for week 2.
Yeah, I think it was 10-4 for not just dogs, for road dogs. It's like the home field advantage of 3 points either which way since COVID has gone down to like 1.5. There's no such thing as home advantage anymore, is there, Ron?
1.25 to 1.75, depending on venue, is what I use for home field advantage. 1.75 to 2 I use for Sunday night and Monday night, different environment. And for the Chargers, sorry, probably about a half a point to 0 for home field advantage. And I like the Chargers. And until I moved, very recently, I lived a few miles from them, but there's just no home field advantage in that stadium.
Well, as we always like to wrap up our weekly edition with you, we throw you a nice little 10-yard button hook so you can wrap up the show with any closing thoughts that you might have.
Okay. 2 closing thoughts, both out of my comfort zone, but why not? First closing thought is, you just can't turn the ball over in the NFL. I don't have the crystal ball on turnovers, but like we said, Minnesota -3 first week, they should have won against Tampa. Minnesota -3 the second week, they should have won against Philadelphia. Game management by Josh Allen against the Jets, knowing that Aaron Rodgers wasn't in the game and knowing that Zach Wilson was not part of the week 1 game plan, and all he was going to do was, follow a few plays and stuff like that in field goal range to try to get to 13-3, and he overthinks it and causes turnovers. Be wary of these turnover-prone players, because word to the wise, in the NFL, every turnover is worth 3.5 points. In college, every turnover is worth 3.75. So that's a lot of points to get back. If you're -2 in turnover ratio, you're giving a team a touchdown and an extra point. So if you think a team is going to be one-dimensional, it's going to play in the hands of another team, and you can try to predict turnovers, which is very hard to predict, then you've got something going. Survivor. I don't know. Jeff, do you play Survivor?
Yeah, I had the Ravens last week, and I took the Bills this week.
Okay, so that's perfect, because that's going to be my point. I generally don't know a thing about Survivor. I play in small leagues of 20 to there's 20 or 30. We each pitch in like $30 or $40 or something like that. And for 7 years, I wrote my check and gave a donation. The last 2 years, I've won it all. So I must be eating the right foods or something, or it's luck or something. But here's the thing. Do you want to waste? There are 2 schools of thought. And again, I'm not the expert, but I'm just throwing this out for your listeners that like this. Buffalo is a big favorite. Dallas is a big favorite. San Francisco is a big favorite. These are teams that you could use almost any week because they're really good. I'd almost be tempted, and I used Washington last week. And the reason I used Washington is because I was never going to use them again. I mean, why would I ever pick on Washington? If I can, I'd go against Arizona every week, especially when Arizona is the road team. And Washington almost lost that game. I'm curious as to whether or not maybe a team like Denver would be something that I would be considering in Survivor and save the Buffaloes and whatever. I'm more interested in finding a team that I'll never use again right now, but has a winning shot. I don't know, philosophically, since you've done this maybe for higher stakes, how you feel about that.
No, I thought last week there were three train wrecks with the initial eye test. Obviously, it was Baltimore. I thought Washington, and I thought Seattle. Those were the three train wrecks, and you could add Minnesota as the fourth.
Minnesota for
And
sure, without the shutdown D.
yes. So Minnesota loses and Seattle loses. Ravens played a bad first half, but they win. And then Washington, Arizona played a great game. Good, hats off to them. They hung
Yeah.
around. But no, I love that thought process right there. What I will never do or try until it gets late in the year is I will try to stay away from road games. I will 99.9% of the time try to stay away from divisional games. I do use the model survive in advance, but when there's a lot of train wrecks, Dallas, Bills, you want to watch the train wreck versus, like you said, a Denver. Do they go 0-2? And I'm going to close with this. I thought when I looked at the opening numbers, Ron, I thought that was the stench of the week. Denver coming off a loss to the Raiders, only 3-point favorites against Washington. Did that line, was that the number that you had as well, or does that smell a little fishy to me?
Well, Sam Howell is a concern right now based on how he played that first week. When he has I think there's going to be a problem against a team like Denver. And that's why I mentioned Denver, because they would have more of a shutdown defense. I really don't want to take a survivor pick that doesn't have a shutdown defense unless their offense is going to absolutely dominate. My line was 2.5 actually, because I don't have Denver highly rated. I don't have Washington highly rated. So actually I was surprised it actually crossed 3, which is concerning me because I can't play Denver, at those numbers. But I think 3 types of handicapping I do: situational, technical, and power rating handicap. And technical numbers, technical style of play really favors Denver.
Well, and lastly, when you're talking about a bounce back situation, I think a lot of people using that thought process you were talking about might be back on the Giants. Arizona's one of those fade teams, and the Giants looked, so bad. And sometimes it's good to get away from home, get out on the road, come together as a team, and just wipe off that one loss. It's probably better to lose 40-0 than a walk-off field goal and lose, 28-27 or something.
There's a lot of people that are feeling that way about the Giants, that they will bounce back this year. I've heard a lot of that from people in my network. I'd be scared either way, but good for them. I mean, they're certainly, the New York Giants should be better than Arizona, but I don't know.
An amazing show as always. If you're not following him, please go follow him on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it today at Ron A Sports. Amazing. If you follow him and ask him a question, he actually does reply. Go check out his podcast with Las Vegas Chris. Some amazing nuggets on a week-to-week basis. And we're blessed and honored to have you here every Friday at 5 o'clock, Ron, and look forward to many Fridays from here on out.
As usual, thanks for having me. And I already have some juicy things lined up for next Tuesday. And I'm sure you and I are going to talk some marquee games next Friday. So by all means, come back and see us.
From myself, Jeff Dawson at EC Sports Invest, the one and only Mr. Ron at Ron A Sports. We want everyone to have a great weekend. All the locals back east, batten down the hatchets. Make sure you got your batteries, everything charged up. It's going to be coming late tonight, early tomorrow. Tropical storm, or they're calling it Hurricane Lee, but a tropical storm here on the Cape. So, guys, behave yourself. Enjoy yourself. Cash a few tickets here and there, and we'll catch up to you next week.